Okay. Well, I would like to take this opportunity, Mr. Gaillard, to thank you once again for having come to the Institute for Culture Diplomacy. It was an honor to have your keynote address this evening, and I think in many ways we were really all very much touched and inspired at the potential that there really exists for sports to act as a catalyst for culture diplomacy. My colleagues have prepared some questions that they'd like to pose as a follow-up to your lecture. Please.
The first question is, what does UEFA do in the field of cultural diplomacy? How is UEFA doing to create a huge impact as opposed to bring cultural nations together, considering that sports also create
Well, there is a fine balance between competition and mutual understanding. I mean, there's always a tension. Football has some soft power, and it has some soft power because we decided to use that soft power. And in many ways, what we've been doing on issues like racism, discrimination, homophobia, is all linked to the soft power that football can express. Because if we take sanctions against all members that do not conform to certain principles in those areas, it has an impact on society. Because football players are role models, if they get sanctioned, young people in particular become aware of what is an acceptable behavior, or what is an acceptable statement, and what is not. So we have tremendous responsibility. And if we don't really do our duty, we can have an extremely negative impact. It's almost this fear of having the negative impact on the development of society through the influence we have on young people that forces us to be extremely vigilant in the areas where football has an impact.
Tying in with that, is sport a unifying factor? If so, is it possible to transfer this unity into everyday life?
I really believe that sports is a mirror of society. So it's not better and it's not worse than society itself. But it has the power to mobilize. Now, because traditionally football has attracted players and young people from the less privileged sectors of society, football does play a social integration role. I mean, even beyond the fact that many non-governmental organizations use football in dealing with homelessness and poverty and exclusion and social marginalization. But football clubs in themselves bring people together who otherwise would never meet. And I see it, I mean, my own children have friends in communities that they would never enter if they were not playing football. And that, of course, brings people together. But we have to be careful, because diversity can also bring conflict. It can also strengthen stereotypes if we're not careful to put it in the right context. So we have a duty to make sure that what happens on the pitch works in favor of conciliation, tolerance, and unity, rather to the opposite effect. And sometimes the borderline is very thin between the two.
In ancient times, the Olympic Games brought peace and armistice to people. How has this concept of peace in sports changed? For example, the film Olympia by the Gaillard not only promoted peace in games, but also promoted the national interest and ideology of the Nazi regime. How has the promotion and coverage of sports changed since Olympia?
Well, you know, when Leni Riefenstahl was working on the film, the historical context was so different from what we are living now that it would be unfair to say today, you know, of course we don't do. When you watch the film today, you are acutely conscious of the whole political background. You're acutely conscious of the role of the movie as a piece of propaganda. But at the same time, there are some elements in the film. The whole episode between Lutz Long and Jesse Owens in the broad jump, where you see ideology being vanquished by the sheer power of human relations. So I don't think society today is considerably better than it was in 1936. Yes, you had a particularly evil regime in this very city, no doubt. But otherwise, prejudices are still very rife in society. And this is why we have to remain vigilant. Because sports can be used for a very negative purpose, as well as a positive one. But we shouldn't be naive in accepting, oh, it's great, we all play together. It has its limitations. We need to enforce a certain code of behavior on an everyday basis. The battle is never completely won.
Going on from that code of behavior you just mentioned, can you maybe give us a few words about what UEFA does in terms of racism? For example, the respect campaign.
Of respect campaign. Well, we have a long-standing relationship with a non-governmental organization, which is actually a federation of non-governmental organizations, which is called Football Against Racism in Europe. In England, it's called Kick It Out. In different countries, in Poland, it's called Never Again. In Polish, I won't try to pronounce it. It's very active in Germany, everywhere. So through them, we develop projects. And they help us monitor the game. And they point out to us, sometimes when our delegates don't notice it, that some things went wrong in a game. Or there are some issues in a specific country. And so we intervene through education, seminars, and so on, and through sanctions. Because, you have to use the carrot and the stick. So our policy is tolerance zero in the area of discriminations. We fund a lot of projects, including in helping people with disability. We have a strong corporate social responsibility program that goes in all areas: discrimination, disability, environmental issues. We try to cover a wide spectrum of social causes: homelessness, poverty. Not because we think we can make a tremendous impact financially. I mean, it's a few million euros a year, but it's not going to change the world. But we know that the impact that football has on public opinion, and if we raise the issue of racism, millions of young kids are bound to listen to us. Whether they accept our message or not is not the issue. They will be impacted by our message. They will have to react to our message. And that's really our duty. The rest is like the icing on the cake, as the French say it, la cerise sur le gâteau. But we have a social responsibility. And we have to fulfill it.
And final question. If, as you say, football is a mirror of society and it's rooted in the proletariat working classes, how can it still have a place in modern society when modern society is drifting more towards middle classes?
Well, I wish society was drifting more towards middle classes. Try to talk to the Portuguese, the Spaniards, the Greeks right now. I'm afraid that we are seeing the middle class regressing in our society. I mean, the impact of the crisis we started in 2008 is not over, and it's not pretty to watch. So, in many ways, in the current situation, football has a tremendous social role to play. Also because, as I said, we are probably the only place where immigrants participate in society, in many cases. There's so many kids who play in our clubs who don't even have residence permits. So I wish I would be as optimistic as you are, saying this great middle class is taking over everything. And I'm afraid that upward social mobility as my generation knew it is something of the past, unfortunately.
All right, well, in that case, I'd like to take a moment to ask a question myself, actually, in terms of the impact that, let's say, sports can have also in terms of reconciliation. We saw in South Africa, for example, where actually football played a very important role in terms of also helping to reconcile wounds from the past. Do you see also in the future, as one sees other complex situations, a similar role that football or sports could have also in terms of reconciliation?
Well, look, football can divide. We know the role that football has played in a number of conflicts, including in Europe, and in particular in the breakup of multi-ethnic political societies. But it's true that football can unite also. The fact is, football is probably the only opportunity that middle-class, young, white kids can have to accept as role models people from ethnic minorities. So as such, their stereotype of ethnic minorities changes. The negative stereotype is transformed into a positive one. They don't think anymore that they are cheering a black or a North African player. They are cheering a hero. And heroes can have all kinds of different faces and colors. And from that point of view, this has a tremendous impact. But again, let's keep our eyes open and let's not go into wild optimism. We have to be vigilant even on these issues. Because football is, as I said, and I repeat it, it's not better than society itself. It gives us some opportunity to intervene in society for the good cause. But it presents also dangers.
Of course. I'd like to follow up on a question my colleague asked earlier regarding also the role of the private sector. As you know, the private sector has traditionally not been very involved in cultural diplomacy initiatives and has remained primarily focused on increasing profits. It has been proven, however, that often cultural diplomacy CSR programs can assist also in increasing profits. So my first question, should the private sector adapt to include cultural diplomacy programs in their corporate social responsibility initiatives? Secondly, could you provide an example of a private sector company that is not practicing cultural diplomacy but could benefit from initiating a cultural diplomacy program?
Well, I have a problem, which is I would never use the profit motive in order to convince a corporation that they have to do their social duty. I believe we should use ethical arguments. Do you want to work for a corporation that despises the bulk of the population it sells to? Do you want to work for a corporation that has no respect for the environment? Do you want to work for a corporation that does not contribute anything to public education? I think in some ways we have to shame them into doing something if they have not done it yet, because I mean there's so many examples of the private sector being involved in social responsibility and in cultural diplomacy, that the ones that are not doing it have no excuse.
And do you think that's enough, though? That's societal pressure? I mean, in a world that very often is run by greed, by profits, etc., even though I would agree with you, I would like companies to do it for the right reasons, I almost think there's a necessity that one needs to interweave, give them also concrete incentives, in addition to also putting, let's say, the moral pressure that they should do the right thing. I mean, do you think it would be realistic to just expect they would do it because it's the right thing to do?
I don't know what is the ultimate motive behind the fact that most large corporations have social responsibility programs. But certainly, if you want to define excellence in the business sector, it usually involves also the social impact of that specific corporation. And I cannot think of an excellent corporation that would not be aware of the social environment in which it operates. Okay. I think it'd be crazy for them not to do so.
Well, that's a good lead into my next question. Do you know of any successful examples of the private sector applying culture diplomacy, maybe from the sports industry or one of these CSR projects that you've seen that actually has had an impact?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are many examples that spring to my mind. I've been in touch with a large number of corporations on CSR issues, on issues like racism, which, I mean, the fight against racism is a prime example of cultural diplomacy. It's a fight against prejudice. It's a fight against treating another human being differently from what you would treat yourself. And very large corporations have invested a lot in the idea that yes, we are diverse, yes, we are different, but we're all human. I mean, I don't want to quote names because it would be unfair to the ones I wouldn't quote, but I think we all have in mind even advertising campaigns that focus very sharply on discrimination issues and on cultural tolerance, which is at the root of cultural diplomacy.
Oh, thank you. And then my final question, how do sports reflect national identity? Do they strengthen a national identity? Is sport a unifying factor of nations? Is it possible to transfer this unity to everyday life? And I'm thinking of an interesting example in Germany. I remember when the first Turkish players were playing for the German team, that had a big impact on also the Turkish diaspora here in Germany, really feeling also more part of the society. How do you think sports reflect national identity?
Well, football in particular, as I try to show today, is intimately linked to the great movement of nationalities at the end of the 19th century. Okay, it's established because it is, modernity meant self-awareness. Football was very much part of modernity. It was the first time that the working classes had any leisure time, and therefore could spend it kicking a ball or watching movies. Or going to a dance hall. Now, football also played a role in exacerbating national identity. And national identity can, of course, breed racism. Okay. It can breed extremism politically. Now, we have moved in a completely different era. Some people call it postmodern. Today, the young people who are interested in football are watching teams, clubs in particular, that have no national identity. So it has certainly increased their ability to identify with people who are different from them, who don't look like them, or don't even speak the same language as they speak. So you can identify with these people beyond all these barriers. And that football has accomplished. At the same time, there is no doubt that bigotry is not dead. That in some cases, you accept the diverse person if he plays for your club, but you reject him or her if she plays for the opponents on the basis of that diversity. So it's a mixed bag.
No, well, thank you very much for your reflections and insights in the context of this interview, as well as the lecture earlier on. We have a panel discussion coming up, so I think we should conclude it here. But once again, thank you very much, Mr. Gaillard. It was an honor to have you here. Thank you very much.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you.